Kansas could take, a handful of losses in the non-conference, and I don't think I would really feel that differently as long as I was feeling like they were taking steps forward as the non-conference is progressing, right? If we're having this exact same conversation, in a month when KU plays against like NC State or something, and it's the same sort of discussion, I will be more worried. Pay heed all who enter and beware of this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit of KU basketball as Kansas football enters a bye week. We didn't get a chance to talk about KU in North Carolina that happened over the weekend on Friday night, so we'll talk a little bit about that, some of our takeaways from the game, and look ahead to what KU has upcoming on its schedule. The next big matchup for KU is going to be against Duke coming up next week at the Champions Classic. I think Kevin and I will be live after the game. I hadn't actually asked Kevin off the air before we started recording, so I hope that might be working for you, Kevin.
Yeah, we'll find a way to make that work.
Yeah, so you can probably expect us to have a live reaction show after the KU Duke game at the Champions Classic next week. By the way, it is a bye week for KU football. We're probably going to talk some more KU football still later this week. If you did miss our live reaction show to KU and Arizona on Saturday evening, you can go ahead and check that out on our feed. You can find it on our YouTube channel as well, because that was not exactly a fun one. And as it turned out, it wasn't really a fun weekend of sports for KU athletics as a whole. You lose on Friday against North Carolina. Then you lose on Saturday afternoon against Arizona, and then KU women's soccer plays the Big 12 tournament final against BYU and loses in that one as well.
You throw in the current losing in the playoffs, and it was a brutal local sports week.
Yep, the Kansas City Current also lost in the opening round of the playoffs after having literally the greatest season of all time.
Yeah.
So that was unfortunate as well. So, and then on top of all that, in Kansas City and in the Kansas area, it just randomly decided to be 20 degrees for 2 days.
Yeah, and then it's going to be perfectly nice after that. But
exactly. So I guess welcome to the world of Kansas weather, I suppose. But going back to Friday night, Kansas does lose against North Carolina. They end up losing 87-74. It was kind of a weird game, a frustrating game in a lot of ways. Kansas was actually leading at halftime, 37-29. And then they just get pretty much dominated in the second half. They lose the second half by almost by over 20 points in total when you look at the final score. So a tough one for KU. Kevin, upon the rewatch, you and I were both, just for full transparency on Friday night, you and I were both doing some local high school coverage for high school football.
Same game, too.
Yep, same game. It was a Free State and China Mission Northwest. So we weren't watching this game live, and so that's why we didn't do any sort of live show after the fact or anything like that. So we're talking about it here today. But just what were your takeaways from having the chance to go back and look at the box score, look at what happened in the game, rewatch the game? What was your, I guess, takeaways from the game?
Yeah, this is one where the rewatch felt like it was fairly necessary because you got to see it without emotion, really, because we already knew, hey, this happened. You were up in the press box. I was down on the field and getting pelted by wind, but no bitterness on my behalf. But I'm sure you were doing pretty much the same thing I was, which was, following along as it was going along. And on rewatch, Nick, it just felt like the defense really let Kansas down. And I'm not saying the offense is perfect, and the complaints about, hey, you have to find somebody to score other than Darren Peterson, all of that is totally valid. Kansas was having to work really hard to get a lot of the points that they did get. But ultimately, Carolina scores 58 in the second half. You get beat on the glass. You wind up giving up dunks off of screens, open threes off of screens. Even when you defended the screener well, you were giving up an open shooter. And it felt a lot, the second half, Nick, for me, felt a lot like that Gonzaga game a couple years ago where you just got screen and rolled to death and screen and pop to death. And I think when the good news is that was at the end of the season, your season was over. Kansas certainly has a lot of time to work on rotations and get those things solidified. And with the athleticism that Kansas has, I don't think that we're going to be seeing the same issues in terms of tracking shooters, not defending ball screens, all of those things still in February that we're seeing right now. And quite frankly, Nick, this is part of the reason you and I feel like have been saying since the summer, be patient with this team, because you're going to have some moments even early where you're really going to like what you see. That the first half was probably one of those, and you're going to have some moments where it's going to be pretty rough sledding, and that's going to be part of the growth process of this team.
Yeah, certainly the biggest thing that I looked back at this game is what you mentioned is the defense, right? And Bill Self has openly stated several times over the course of the preseason and the start of the season that he needs his team to be really, really, really strong on defense. And that's not surprising. That's a Bill Self philosophy thing. That's not like this is breaking news. It's not like all of a sudden Bill Self is like, well, maybe we should try playing defense.
I know what our headline is for the episode. Bill Self says KU needs defense. Yeah.
Yeah, Bill Self says KU needs defense for the 22nd straight season, right? Like that's one of his calling cards. But it rings true, I think, especially for this team because of the fact that you have more athletes on the team. That, as you mentioned, offense, it's pretty clear, I think, is going to go through some ups and downs over the course of this season as KU tries to, I guess, both simultaneously learn how to play with Darren Peterson and then also learn how to play without him, right?
Sure.
Because both those factors are both those things are factors here. You know, when he's on the court, obviously you want him to be the focal point of your offense, but obviously the defense is going to be trying to limit that. And so you got to find ways to still score around him. And then obviously when he's not on the court, you need somebody else to step up, right? But as it pertains to the defense, yeah, you're right. It was a real breakdown in the second half for KU defensively overall. And the one thing I would say about not overreacting necessarily to what happened in this game for KU is this is a young team, obviously, and the environment I think probably was certainly a factor in this game. And I don't think it's surprising that KU ended up, having to deal with that a little bit, especially in the second half. They just didn't respond in the correct way, right? Yeah. And so with the defense, it feels like it's going to be something that's going to grow over time, right? So I think we talked about it even before the game, which is it's November 7th when the game is played, right? You are so far from what you want your team to be at this stage of the season, right? I mean, you ask any coach around the country and they would say, hey, we don't want to be playing our best basketball in November, right? Because championships aren't won in November. They're won in March and April, right? So with that being said, obviously you do want to see KU start to develop forward. And that's kind of, I guess, where I went with this game is truthfully, like, and maybe this is just me being a little bit spoiled, from watching Kansas for so long, but like, I don't really care about the final results for Kansas that much in these next couple weeks. I really just care about, is the team getting better, right?
Yeah, sure.
Are they playing better, right? Like Kansas could take, a handful of losses in the non-conference, and I don't think I would really feel that differently as long as I was feeling like they were taking steps forward as the non-conference is progressing, right? If we're having this exact same conversation, in a month when KU plays against like NC State or something, and it's the same sort of discussion, I will be more worried. But right now, that's not really where I'm at in terms of some of the issues that KU has. And then you also mentioned the rebounding, Kevin. That was obviously something else that I think was a pretty big issue for Kansas. You didn't really get much from the rebounding standpoint. By the way, North Carolina had 16 offensive rebounds in the game as well, so they were getting a lot of second chance opportunities.
Grabbed 44% of the available rebounds, which would put you number one in the country pretty much any year.
Yeah, and
consistently.
So Flory had 7 rebounds, but then you only get 2 from Melvin Council, 2 from Trey White, and 0 from Cole Rosario in 20 minutes of action.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of an issue for Kansas as well. But I will say, to sort of counteract that, we talked about it also as well heading into the game. North Carolina has an incredibly large lineup.
Yes.
When you think about what they have with Vaysar and Caleb Wilson and Jefferson and what they did. So that's another thing where I'm thinking, okay, yes, the rebounding was pretty bad, but you're also playing against maybe one of the biggest teams in totality you might see all season, right? So that's where I'm noticing it, but I'm not going to overreact too much to the fact that Kansas did struggle on the glass because with or Stevenson, I'm sorry, yeah, Stevenson with the size that North Carolina has, and so that's where I'm kind of at is like, okay, yes, some of the flaws of this team were evident. I think especially in the second half with some of what they did, but North Carolina is a very long team, and it's pretty clear that they were able to capitalize on that against Kansas and disrupt them. And so we'll see where things go from here. Kansas gets a couple easy games before they play Duke, but yeah, I'd like to see this team. Like to see what this team will do to bounce back over the next week.
Yeah, there are only I just looked it up on KenPom. There are only 3 teams, 3 power conference teams that have a higher average height than North Carolina. One of them, unfortunately, is Duke. So you're gonna face some of those same challenges, but your point still holds. You know, KU's not typically going to face a team that's going to roll out a 6'10" guy at the 3, and so I think that was a big part of the challenge. North Carolina, in addition to all that, Nick, also had a guy in Seth Trimble who could make life difficult for Darren Peterson. I thought Peterson played well. I'm not saying that, but he wasn't getting a whole lot easy, right? He wasn't getting, sort of the, hey, I just blew by this guy and I'm getting an easy layup, or I shook this guy loose for a wide open jump shot. He hit some really tough NBA caliber shots in this one to get his points. And so I think the combination of what Carolina had, and I was interested to see how Carolina looked in this one too, just to see, because I think watching them, I do wind up thinking now, obviously with Trimble now being hurt, for those of you who didn't see, he got hurt in a workout over the weekend. He's going to be out for a while. I think he broke a bone in his wrist or something like that.
Oof.
With Trimble being out for a while, they may wind up losing a few games here and there. But that didn't look like the number 25 team in the country. That looked like a team that was significantly closer to a top 10 team, especially the way that they played in that one. But I had a question for you, Nick, before we kind of head into the break.
Yeah.
You and I have talked all along about, hey, it's going to take a little while, be patient, all of these different things. Do you think the Louisville win and the way that game went, especially with, blowing out Louisville before Darren Peterson went out in that game, kind of short-circuited people's expectations a little bit in terms of, hey, we're going to wait. Hey, it may take some time. And then you go to a top 10 team like Louisville's place, absolutely push them around and run them out. And so I think, I'll admit personally, part of the reason that I thought Kansas was equipped to go in and beat North Carolina at North Carolina was the way they played at Louisville. And so I wonder if you think that maybe that game sort of took people's expectations from, okay, they're going to be right here to start the year too. Well, maybe we're actually here.
Yeah, I think that probably factored in. Honestly, Kevin, I just think it's the Darren Peterson effect.
For sure.
I think people watch Darren Peterson and people hear about Darren Peterson as being like the next big thing. And when you have that much talk around you, the expectation is you're just going to go out and win games, right?
Yeah.
You may have seen Caleb Wilson made some comments after North Carolina's win about Darren Peterson and sort of that a little bit, right? So there is some of that, right? And when you have that you're going to have a big target on your back, which it's clear that Darren Peterson individually does. And obviously, as Kansas fans know, Kansas generally has a target on their backs anyways because of the prestige of their program. So I think maybe the Louisville game factored in a little bit, but I honestly believe it's more of just the fact that A, Darren Peterson played so well in that game, right? And then B, all the hype that he's getting, people just assume, hey, if you have this guy who is like literally being talked about as somebody who could be like the next LeBron James and sometimes this like, then you should be going out and you should be winning these types of games.
Doug Gottlieb, closest thing to Kobe that
or Kobe. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
When you have opposing coaches saying that, I think that seeps into fans' minds as like, okay, then we should be going out and winning almost every game we play. That.
Yeah, and I think our initial take was probably correct. Like, hey, it's going to take a little while for all these guys to get together. Remember, Flory's pretty much the only returnee. I get that El Marco was in the program, Jamari McDowell was here, but even Flory is playing a different role than he did a year ago. Last year he was playing the four next to Hunter Dickinson at times. But even beyond that, he wasn't counted on to be the starting center and play as many minutes as he did. And so you have basically an entire team of new guys from that standpoint, in that nobody is back in the role that they were in a year ago at Kansas. And so it's going to take them a little bit to hit their stride. I'm with you in that the biggest thing I want to see is improvement. Obviously, from a seeding standpoint, et cetera, you'd like to sneak a few results in there. If you could beat a Duke, if you could find a way to beat a UConn or somebody like that over the course of this non-conference schedule, that would help quite a bit and probably help the confidence level and building all of that quite a bit. But I agree with you in that the number one thing to watch during non-conference season is just, are they better today than they were yesterday? And are they better tomorrow than they are today? And I think that's the way to really view this team. And if you view it that way, I don't think you're going to be as miserable. I don't think you're going to be in a spot where you're like, oh, the sky is falling. You're going to maybe enjoy the journey a little bit more, which I think is going to be important because, Nick, I do think that this is a team that has a chance to be a real force to be reckoned with when it matters most.
Yeah, 100% agree. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the individual performances we saw against North Carolina and more. We'll take a quick break before we do that. And that gives a chance to remind you that if you're a Chiefs fan, you could be on the field at the 50-yard line inside GEHA Field for the official coin toss at a Chiefs home game this season. Visit Chiefs.com/GEHA now. Enter for a chance to win to be on the field for a once-in-a-lifetime view of the pregame coin toss. Plus, you can score the exclusive prizes. Enter for a chance to win at Chiefs.com/GEHA. GEHA is a proud partner of the Kansas City Chiefs, and more KU basketball talk is coming up next.
My name is Terrell Jolly. A lot of people call me TJ, founder and CEO of Integrity Capital Management. So Integrity Capital Management originally started out as a property management firm, but we slowly transitioned to what is described as an incremental development firm that's focused on situational housing. I know most people say affordable, but we believe in creating housing for people that are actually in need and built to the end user. I believe everyone needs a home because when you have home, you have hope. The reality is that when you're building a business, one thing you don't think about is like what a true banking relationship means. And, I had the honor and privilege of meeting Debbie early on in my career when I was just trying to get going. And as a small business, it's really challenging at times because people don't understand the concept or not believe the longevity because you're just getting started. But Debbie was willing to take a chance on me, be patient with me. I almost look at it like a grassroots initiative. She's seen and believe what I'm about. Anybody that's really true about their business and want to get some things done, I would definitely trust hands down Enterprise, because Deb's team, along with Aaron and Jackie and all the amazing people that work behind the scenes, even from the treasury side, I would say, hey, give them an opportunity, because you won't be disappointed and you will actually be in hands that actually somebody care and that will see you from start to finish.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you've not already, please go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're on YouTube, or if you are on audio platforms, you can subscribe, Apple, Spotify. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. Leave us a comment. Share your thoughts. Join the conversation. We appreciate those of you that do so. And again, on our YouTube channel especially, you'll want to be subscribed, because that's how you'll be notified when we do some of our live reaction shows. We had a bit of a roller coaster of a live reaction show on Saturday night after KU football lost to Arizona. So if you missed some of our analysis on that, you can go check out that on our feed. And like I said, I think we're going to be live coming up next week for KU and Duke post game. Once again, Kansas gets stuck with the late game, though, Kevin, at the Champions Classic. So that's going to be a bit of a late evening potentially for that one. So we will be live as well for the remainder of the KU football season for those post-game shows. KU with a bye week this week before they play Iowa State and then finish the year against Utah, and then potentially a bowl game. We'll see where things go with that.
Have you played the Champions Classic before?
No, I've never been in person. No.
It's pretty awesome. I would highly recommend anybody that can go. And it's really fun when your team is playing Duke, because all the neutrals are on your side. The Kentucky fans, Michigan State fans, and anybody who's just there to try and watch good basketball, they become fans of whichever team is playing Duke, and so it is a good time and really cool to see it at the Garden. It's a blast there. So
Yeah, which it's at the Garden. I haven't looked. I was
yeah.
trying off the top of my head. That's where it is this year, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So looking forward to that coming up next week as well, and we're hoping to have some other fun content coming your way this week as well with KU football on bye week. We'll probably talk a little more KU football. Hoping to talk some KU soccer potentially as they get ready for the NCAA tournament that might be coming their way later this week as well. So as it pertains to KU basketball, like I said before the break, wanted to dive a little bit deeper into some individual performances. We kind of talked about Darren Peterson a little bit. He ends up with 22 points, goes 3 of 5 from 3, got to the line a little bit, 3 of 5 there. Neither team in this game between KU and North Carolina shot the ball well from the free throw line. Both teams were under 70% from the line, which is not uncommon, I guess, for an early season matchup like this, but something to potentially monitor as well. And then the other kind of big thing, and you mentioned a little bit, Kevin, in the opening segment, about KU looking for its secondary score, right?
Yeah.
And with Flory Badunga, we've talked about him as being sort of not necessarily the guy you're going to draw something up for in the half court, right? Like he's going to be more of your play finisher, not necessarily like your playmaker or creator and what he can do. So it does feel like KU needs another guy. And obviously in the exhibition games, it looked like it maybe was going to be a little bit of Melvin Council potentially. I am posited maybe Cole Rosario. Well, what about Bryson Tiller out of nowhere? The guy hits 4 threes. He goes 4 for 4 from the perimeter in the game for 12 points for him. He ended up fouling out of the game, but Bryson Tiller, do we need to have a more of an extended conversation about what kind of role he can carve out and what that should look like for this Kansas roster?
Yeah, anytime you make 4 threes and have 5 fouls in 15 minutes, that's an eventful showing. So, no, I'm right there with you. And when you look at what Bryson Tiller has done scoring inside the arc and now what he's done, a couple times outside the arc in a couple performances, I mean, maybe he can be that secondary scorer. I still think you want one or both of Cole Rosario and Jaden Dawson to kind of become that extra shooter who can knock down open shots. And I think that would open up a lot of things. Melvin Council got a couple nice drives, but generally speaking, Carolina had the lane pretty well packed. And the way to pull somebody out of that is to make outside jump shots. And when Tiller was making those shots, that's when Kansas made its run, went up 10 and, really put itself into a good position. I also think the defense was a little bit better then too, and kind of fell apart in the second half. But no, if Tiller is going to score like that, and if he can obviously stay on the court while he's doing it, foul trouble I felt like was maybe an undersold part of this game a little bit. Darren Peterson doesn't wind up playing even 30 minutes. You have the foul trouble in the first half. I thought it was interesting that Self did go back to him after sitting him for a little while in that first half. That's something that Self hasn't always done, something that Self has maybe shown a little bit more the last few years, a willingness, if you trust somebody, to put them back out there and play with that second foul. He trusted Darren Peterson in that moment. And that says a lot about a freshman, right? When you're willing to say, not just that you think he's good, but, hey, I trust you to not put yourself in position to pick up this extra foul. At the same time, I don't know how many really good teams Kansas is going to beat if Bryson Tiller fouls out in 15 minutes and Darren Peterson plays less than 30 minutes. And so the foul trouble part was a big aspect of it. But Tiller could absolutely, he can stay on the court and continue to grow. He could absolutely be that second scorer the way he's playing right now.
Yeah, but that kind of leads me to the next question of like, I don't think Bryson Tiller is going to be a starter though, right? Like, I don't really foresee a world where Bill Self would be willing to start him over like a Trey White. Like, I think Trey White does so much of what Bill Self likes outside of scoring.
Yeah, I think if you did it, you would see Trey White slide down to the 3 in the starting lineup. And I'm not saying you couldn't do that, but I still think that potentially, your best outcome is Cole Rosario figuring it out. And we've talked before about how sometimes it takes freshmen a while to get into it. Joel Embiid wasn't a regular starter at the start of the year. And I'm not comparing Rosario to Embiid. Johnny Furphy was a guy that it took him a little while. And then, he was able to pick things up. Ochai was slated to redshirt. And then they basically had other injuries and attrition and said, okay, you got to play now. And he did some good things. And so I know right now it looks like, hey, it should be Trey White, Bryson Tiller at the 3-4 and Flory at the 5. I would just say I think you're actually going to have those sorts of lineup decisions make a lot more sense to you when you're in December or maybe even January.
As it pertains to the foul trouble you mentioned as well, it is kind of funny, right? I mean, how the game has changed where if you have 2 fouls in the first half, that's an auto bench for the remainder of the first half for forever until basically recent memory, where now you start to see some coaches have a little bit more aggressiveness and willing to put guys back on the floor. And Self, I think, has been slow to do that, but he has started to do it a little bit. And as you mentioned, you kind of saw it a little bit with Darren Peterson.
You have to be in the Bill Self circle of trust, right?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. No question about that. No question about that. But yeah, on the topic of Cole Rosario as well.
Yeah.
I still have to believe that he's going to start to figure it out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Bill Self would continue to put him in the starting lineup and continue to put him on the floor if Bill Self didn't personally think that Cole Rosario was gonna figure it out, right? It's obvious that he's got great athleticism, and I know he ends up with 2 threes, but he hit one like right at the buzzer, basically to end.
Yeah, he hit one in the final minute. Yeah, when
the
was decided.
Yeah, so that kind of makes his stat line look slightly better. But yeah, he still continues to kind of struggle from that perspective, and the 0 rebounds honestly is also a bigger red flag for me because Bill Self has talked about wanting Rosario to be a guy that crashes the glass and be aggressive, and he certainly has the athleticism to do that. So not being able to get a single rebound in 20 minutes, that part is maybe a little bit more concerning because if you're not warmed up as a shooter, if you're not confident as a shooter, you absolutely must be doing other things, right, to still help the team out. And that didn't really happen against North Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've talked all along about how basically for freshmen, the key to get on the court, unless you're Darren Peterson, is you have to steal extra possessions with rebounds and you have to defend. And, Cole did a few nice things defensively, but he's got to up those rebounding numbers for sure. And especially against a team like North Carolina that's so big, you're only going to rebound if everybody rebounds. You can't just look at it and say, well, Flory's a good rebounder, we'll be fine. Everybody needs to crash the glass. Quite frankly, North Carolina got way too many easy, not just offensive rebounds, but, dunks off of offensive rebounds, extra terrific shots because they're right around the basket. And in a few of those cases, it was just KU not blocking everybody out. On one of them, you didn't block out Caleb Wilson, and he gets a tip dunk basically, and you just can't do that. And so I think the rebounding, this is a team that has a chance to be really good rebounding wise. I think especially since you have a 6'6" point guard who's a really good rebounder for his position. And so I think you can rebound up and down the lineup, but everybody in that lineup needs to rebound. And so that is concerning that Cole Rosario doesn't get any.
Well, it's another aspect where this team is pretty much the opposite of what we've seen over the past couple of years, where with Hunter Dickinson, you had your one dominant guy rebounding the ball, right? And Flory is not going to reach that level, I don't think, as a sort of dominant rebounder. So you're right. It needs to become team rebounding again, which KU, I think, maybe lost a little bit of that because of how good Hunter Dickinson was as a rebounder. Obviously Hunter Dickinson is a bit of a lightning rod, I think, for the KU fans, but the guy averaged a double-double. Like he got rebounds on rebounds on rebounds over the course of his career at Kansas.
He was a terrific rebounder. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And to your point, I think you're right. And I think that when you look back at, say, like 2016 and 2017 and 2018, Frank Mason and Devontae Graham were coming up with their fair share of rebounds, despite the fact that neither guy was super big, but they rebounded as an entire team. And then obviously you look at the national championship team, a big part of the reason for their success was everybody rebounded, and then whoever rebounded, if it was 1 through 4, started the break. And that was part of the thing that made them really successful. And I think this year's team could be similar in that regard, especially if you have a guy like Trey White in at the 4. He can grab the ball and put it on the floor and kind of start the break for you a little bit. And so this team, I know we're beating a horse that's not just dead, Nick, but has been dead for like 5 years, it feels like at this point. But they really do have to defend and then rebound. Like, it's a non-starter to not do that with this group of people. They're not going to be a team that's going to go win a game 105-95 over a team that has a really good offense. They need to slow the other team down. They need to get stops. And then part of getting that stop, Nick, is, securing possession afterwards. And then the best thing that they can do offensively is operating against a defense that isn't set. And so that's gonna be a really big deal for them moving forward too, is not just defending, but turning defense into offense.
Let's get into a couple final thoughts from maybe a couple guys we didn't quite touch on. Also want to look ahead to KU's upcoming schedule as well, to what they have to do with prior to Duke. We'll do all that coming up next.
Hey, NFL fans, what's your favorite touchdown? For me, it's the next one. And that's because with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, every touchdown could bring you closer to cashing in. First touchdown scores to anytime touchdown props or the thrill of live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. And here's the best part. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. So your team hitting pay dirt pays out to you. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. Pass-through of per wager tax may apply in Illinois. Must be 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. The bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, visit dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
This is the Payee Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Kansas falls against North Carolina, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about it. Now it's time for KU to turn the page a little bit, as they have 2 games before they face Duke in the Champions Classic. That's going to be their next real test. We talked about this difficult schedule that Kansas has in the non-con. They basically have 2 separate spots in the non-conference schedule where it lets up a little bit for them. And one of them is right now. You just played North Carolina. Now you're going to get 2 sort of easier games against Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and Princeton before you play Duke. But then you go to the Players Era, and then you play UConn. Then you have Missouri in the game at the T-Mobile Center, then North Carolina State. And then right before you start conference play, you get 2 sort of easier games leading up to winter break before Christmas, where you play Towson and Davidson at home. So you really get 2 opportunities for Kansas to sort of let out a breath a little bit and play a couple games that you should be able to win fairly comfortably at home. And one of those stretches is right now against Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and then Princeton out of the Champions Classic. So obviously we kind of talked about, Kevin, just wanting to see this team get better. But when you have an opportunity like this for KU, considering how difficult the non-conference schedule is in totality, now you have 2 games against some lesser opponents. Is there anything specific that you look for when you are in this situation where you're going to be playing against some lesser opponents before you then build up again to play a Duke coming up?
Yeah, I want to see consistent defense. And I know, again, it's over and over again, but there are things that you can control and things that you can't control, right? You're going to have some games where your shots don't fall for whatever reason. You can be really close and it feels like the shot's going in and it just rims out. But one of the things that you can always control is your defensive level of intensity. And I think that what you want to see in these situations is you want to see the rotations be crisp. You want to see a lot of effort on that end. I'm interested to see if some of these teams try to put KU into ball screens in a similar manner. And obviously, you're not doing it while having Caleb Wilson and Seth Trimble and those guys out there. But at the same time, I'd be interested to see if that is something that they look at and say, hey, maybe we can get some points out of this, because KU isn't communicating super well on this. They aren't rotating super well on this. The other thing, Nick, is, hey, you're playing Corpus Christi and you're playing Princeton. Go win on the glass and win on the glass at a high level. And I want to see the team rebounding aspect of that as well. I want to see Cole Rosario have a game where he pulls down 5 or 7 boards. I want to see, the backcourt help out on the glass, and then, you turn some of that into offense. And so those are some of the things that I'm looking for. I know a lot of people are going to say, hey, does somebody step up as the number 2 scorer? I still think, yes, it would be great to have that person define, but I think that's going to be a little bit of a process. And I think, quite honestly, Nick, if you have that person be a different guy every night, I think that that's okay for right now. So that's not necessarily what I'm watching as much as sort of are they getting the defensive rotations down? Are they rebounding, and are they able to turn that into transition stuff?
What I can tell you that I don't want to see, Kevin, is I don't want to see a Eastern Illinois or a Southern Utah of the past. Southern Utah was 2022, I think, where it was a very tight game late.
Yeah.
Eastern Illinois was 2023. So let's not do that. Let's go out and take care of business. And no disrespect to the Islanders of Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Look, I'm a Southland guy. You won't find anybody who loves the Southland more than me. And Texas A&M Corpus Christi has been a tournament team actually in recent memory, but they are seemingly not very good this year. They actually just lost to Tarleton State on Saturday. They also lost against SMU before that. So should be able to take care of business against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Kind of the same deal with Princeton, right? Everybody remembers the Princeton run that they had as a 15 seed in the NCAA tournament a couple years ago. This is not the same Princeton. They actually lost against Akron. Kevin, they lost to Akron 104-69.
I was going to say they got thumped by Akron. Yeah.
Yeah. So
again, maybe Akron is Princeton from a few years ago.
Yeah, no kidding. Maybe, yeah. Keep an eye on Akron, folks. Keep an eye first. November 10th, we're telling you to keep an eye on Akron. But yeah, should be 2 games where Kansas should be able to comfortably handle things. Again, mainly, I think what I'm looking for, kind of outside of what you mentioned, is let's get Cole Rosario and Jaden Dawson going, right? Like, let one of those guys, or hopefully one of those guys, can maybe just have a game or two where they just become a flamethrower from the outside, and that can get them going, right? I think that would be really, really nice to see. And these games are prime opportunities for Kansas to see what they can come up with outside of Darren Peterson if he's not on the floor, right? I mean, I would expect, I guess we'll see how things play out, but I would expect, at least if I were Bill Self, the process would be let Darren Peterson go out and wreak havoc in the first half, rack up his, 15, 20 points. And then assuming you're up by, more than double digits, really no need to keep playing him beyond that, right? And also, I think that could maybe be a positive for Kansas to not play him, because then you get a chance to figure out who maybe your next level, your next guys might be beyond him. So maybe that's I don't want to say that's like the game plan, like obviously,
sure.
But I think that could be an unintended positive of you get up big. Okay, Darren, we get it. You can dunk all over these guys that are 6'4" from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Like, sweet. Cool. Let's see what else maybe we can have in terms of scoring beyond that, right? So I don't know. Maybe that's something to keep an eye on for these games as well.
Yeah, I thought you put it really well earlier in the show when you mentioned the dynamic of you're looking for that number 2 scorer when Peterson's on the court, and you're also looking for who's going to be the guy when he's off. And so it is a little bit of a weird dynamic, right? In that you would like to not have Peterson play 35 minutes against these teams, and you would like to be in a spot where you can kind of figure out the second question, but at the same time, you are still trying to find the answer to the first. You're trying to find who's going to play well with Darren Peterson and who's going to be somebody that he can count on to help the offense when he's out there. And so you're kind of trying to solve for X on both sides of the equation there.
Yeah, 100% agree. Because I do think that's an overlooked aspect of it is when Darren Peterson's on the floor, it's like, what do you need a second scorer for? Like, Darren Peterson's just going to go do his thing, right? But like, you definitely want to have guys that can be relied upon, for him to work with, right? In terms of flowing through the offense. And most importantly, and I think, Bill Self has mentioned this as well, Darren Peterson, maybe one of the better aspects of his game is actually his defense. But his defense may suffer if he's forced to be handling the ball for 20 seconds at a time in the half court every single possession for Kansas offensively, right? So finding ways to utilize him off the ball on offense, finding ways to create with him away from the ball to maybe just even help him to where he can go and show what he can do defensively, I think is something also maybe to consider as well when you think about him being on the floor. But yeah, I would love to see, just to reiterate, I would love to see Jaden Dawson and or Cole Rosario hit some shots, get going a little bit. We talked about Marco Jackson after the opener and maybe where he's at. He ends up fouling out against North Carolina, scores 6 points. Would still like to see him. I would like to just see more of him, truthfully.
Yeah.
Same goes with Bryson Tiller, but I'd like to just see him more into the flow, right? Because I was a little worried after that opening game where he kind of looked a little bit more like his freshman self than what I was hoping to see at this stage. But obviously, we're talking about a guy coming off a major injury and his first real competitive basketball again, so I'm willing to give him some time as well. I guess sort of that's maybe the underlying theme here is that I am, and I think you are as well, willing and prepared to give this KU team quite a bit of time to get things going, right? So I would encourage other people to exercise maybe that same level of patience. But again, if we get later into the non-conference slate and we're still kind of talking about some of these same issues, then yes, I would be a bit more concerned, right? If we're sitting here after UConn, after Missouri, North Carolina State, where it's a lot of the same conversation, and you're basically at that point leading into the start of conference play, yes, I would be a little worried. By the way, speaking of the South End, I got to give the South End its props, bro, because New Orleans beats TCU, and TCU is going to be one of the teams that KU is going to face early in conference play as well. But yeah, shout out to the South End. Those are my boys. Mad respect for the South End Conference.
Yeah, TCU was getting killed for a while. They came back and made things a game, but that was not a great showing for the old Big 12 in that one.
Yeah, shout out to the privateers of New Orleans for handling business and getting that big win, standing up for the South End Conference.
Like to your point, let the sauce cook, right? Like don't freak out too much about this. It's going to be a growing process. If you're making a good like Sunday sauce, you gotta let it cook kind of for 4 or 6 hours. All day is even better. The flavors got to come together, and so you got to give it a little bit of time.
Well, Kevin, I know you're a huge crockpot guy, right? You love the crockpots.
I do enjoy the crockpot quite a bit. I do make a pretty good Sunday like bolognese type of sauce as well, and put several different kinds of meat in there and just cook it for hours. And it's I'm a big low and slow guy when you look at like smoking meat and stuff too. So I am well equipped for this. But if you look at a brisket and you're like, man, I'm going to cook that thing high and fast, like this may not be the team for you.
And this has been Cooking with Kevin. Thanks so much for joining us today. Kevin, you got any final thoughts before we wrap things up for today?
No. I think we hit on it, and I think your point about learning to play with and without Darren Peterson is going to be something to watch for these few games. I really do think the defensive aspect is the most important one for this team, and included in that, I feel like, is the rebounding, because you have to finish off those defensive possessions. But ultimately, I think watch the next couple games to see, hey, what Bryson Tiller did against North Carolina, is this something that's sustainable Is he able to stay on the court for 25 minutes and not get into foul trouble? Is Melvin Council being more aggressive with his drives? Are guys hitting shots to where the lane opens up where Melvin Council can get more on his drives? And then when Darren Peterson checks out, who's running the offense at that point? I do think the offense looks a little bit better when Melvin Council is out there, when Darren Peterson isn't, just in terms of getting into the offense, running the offense, those sorts of things. But are you able to find somebody on sort of, you hate to call it a second unit because it can be all the starters, but not have Darren Peterson out there. But with that group, who's going to be the guy that makes you say, okay, we can sit Darren for a little bit because we feel like we've got enough offense out there on the court?
We'll be talking a little bit more probably later in the week, and we'll definitely have a preview show of Duke at some point as well, prior to the Champions Classic, where Kansas takes on the Blue Devils later, early next week, I should say. It is a bye week for KU football, so highly encourage you to check out our reaction show to KU in Arizona if you haven't already. Whatever you're doing, be sure to like and subscribe, do all that great stuff, share a comment, join in on the conversation. We appreciate those of you that do so. We love hearing from you guys, and thank you for continuing to support the show. So we'll talk again very soon later this week, but until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. We'll talk again soon. See ya.